31 governors, over 240 National Assembly members, the most dominant ruling party apparatus Nigeria has seen since the return of democracy in 1999. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is playing Nigerian politics better than any president since Obasanjo. He has absorbed opposition governors, neutralized internal critics, distributed infrastructure visibly across all 6 geopolitical zones, and secured IMF and World Bank endorsement for his economic program. By every institutional measurement, party strength, legislative control, security of tenure, he is the overwhelming favorite for 2027. But this channel exists to ask the question that the endorsement do not answer. Because in 2015, Goodluck Jonathan had 28 governors, a united National Assembly, and the full machinery of the federal government. He still lost. The difference between an unbeatable incumbent and a defeated one is not always visible in the political architecture. Sometimes it lives in the kitchens, the farms, and the communities where ordinary Nigerians make their real political calculations. Today on AFRO News HQ, we are going to give Tinubu the honest analysis that his supporters will not. These are the 5 things he is doing or failing to do that could still cost him 2027. Most channels will give you the headline, we give you the architecture behind it. If you have never been here before, you just found Nigeria's most analytical political channel. Subscribe because what comes next in this video is the part they hope you never piece together. The strength is real. Let us acknowledge it first. AFRO News HQ does not produce propaganda in either direction. Before we examine Tinubu's vulnerabilities, we must accurately state his strength because the analysis only has value if it begins from the truth. He won the 2023 election with 36.6% of the vote, defeating Atiku Abubakar's 29% and Peter Obi's 25.4%. He met the constitutional threshold of 25% in 30 states. He has since expanded APC control from 23 governorships at inauguration to 31 as of March 2026, including absorbing most of the PDP's remaining gubernatorial base. The APC now holds over 80 Senate seats and 241 House of Representative seats, the most comprehensive legislative dominance any Nigerian ruling party has achieved since 1999. He has delivered visible infrastructure, roads, bridges, and electrification projects distributed across all geopolitical zones with deliberate federal character awareness. He has removed the fuel subsidy, a fiscally necessary reform that every previous administration avoided. He has floated the naira, painful in the short term, essential for macroeconomic stability, and he has maintained political discipline within the APC at a level that has kept internal dissent largely contained. What is the trigger for this analysis? The trigger is not a single event. It is the pattern emerging from verified data, public opinion research, security reports, and economic indicators in the first quarter of 2026, 18 months before the January 16, 2027 election date. The data shows that Tinubu's political strength and his citizens' lived reality are moving in opposite directions. That divergence is the analytical story of this video. A PDP chieftain recently stated on national television that Tinubu knows a free and fair election would not give the APC 20% of the vote. That is a strong claim, and we will return to whether the data supports it and what it reveals about the actual foundation of Tinubu's electoral strength. The Muslim ticket that Tinubu ran in 2023 is already under scrutiny for 2027, particularly in the context of the U.S. Congress's Nigeria Religious Freedom Act and Trump's Christian genocide claims. We will return to how the running mate question could become a significant electoral variable. The 5 vulnerabilities. 1. The economy is winning on paper and losing in the kitchen. This is the central contradiction of his presidency. Nigeria's economy has contracted significantly since Tinubu took office. The World Bank notes the economy has halved to under $200 billion. A Business Day poll found that 60.4% of respondents said his reforms have made life worse for the average Nigerian. When asked their top concern, 64.6% cited economic hardship and the rising cost of living. With the naira exchanging at over 1,600 naira to a dollar, petrol selling at over 1,000 naira per litre, and inflation approaching 40%, with youth unemployment above 40%, the situation has become so unbearable that skilled Nigerians are leaving the country in record numbers. PricewaterhouseCoopers projected that 13 million more Nigerians could fall below the poverty line as a direct result of Tinubu's policy overhaul. The IMF praises the macroeconomic architecture. The Nigerian voter cannot afford breakfast. That gap between the economy that analysts celebrate and the economy that voters endure is the single most dangerous electoral variable he faces. Jonathan lost in 2015 partly because Nigerians felt the pain of governance before they saw its benefits. Tinubu is navigating the same dynamic, and the 2027 election will arrive before most of the structural benefits of his reforms reach the table of ordinary citizens. Vulnerability rating. High. This is the most direct electoral threat. Economic pain translates to protest votes regardless of institutional strength. The 2015 precedent is exact. 2. Insecurity has not been solved, it has spread. Amnesty International reported that at least 10,217 people were killed in attacks by gunmen in the 2 years since Tinubu took office. In the first 2 months of 2026 alone, over 1,000 Nigerians were killed across 25 states, a figure cited by Peter Obi himself in a public statement. The jihadist bridge bombing in Niger State that Afronews HQ covered last week is a symptom of a larger pattern. The North Central Corridor is deteriorating, the Bogu-Kainji jihadist expansion is undeclared and publicly unaddressed, and farmers across the northeast and northwest are fleeing land that produces over 60% of Nigeria's agricultural output. A prominent northern elder stated it directly. If President Tinubu refuses to wipe out the security challenges, he will definitely not win the 2027 election, drawing explicit parallels with Goodluck Jonathan's 2015 defeat. The connection is precise. Jonathan lost the North because the North felt abandoned. Tinubu won the North with 25% thresholds in 2023. If northern communities feel that the administration's security response has been inadequate by January 2027, those threshold percentages are at risk. Vulnerability rating. High. Security failure in the North cost Jonathan the 2015 election. The pattern is repeating. The directional movement is wrong. 3. The Muslim ticket and the religious fault line. Tinubu ran a Muslim ticket in 2023, himself and Vice President Kashim Shettima, and won despite significant Christian community concern. For 2027, the same ticket faces a more hostile environment. The U.S. Congress's Nigeria Religious Freedom and Accountability Act directly references Christian persecution in Nigeria. U.S. President Trump's Christian genocide designation of Nigeria has placed religious identity at the center of Nigeria's international political narrative. And the domestic Sharia debate, which Afronews HQ has covered in detail, is actively inflaming interfaith tensions across the South. Credible political analysts have noted that Tinubu may need to consider a Christian running mate for 2027 to diffuse the religious vulnerability that was manageable in 2023 but may be significantly larger in a re-election context where incumbency performance is also being assessed. If he retains Shettima and the Christian community's concern has grown, he risks losing percentage points in the Middle Belt and South-South that he cannot afford to give away to a consolidated opposition.
Vulnerability rating, medium-high. The religious ticket is manageable but exposed. The US-Nigeria religious freedom dynamic has added an international dimension that did not exist in 2023.
4. Anti-corruption as a political weapon. The credibility cost. The EFCC conviction of former Accountant General Noah Boku and the ICPC prosecution of El-Rufai, both covered in recent AFR News HQ scripts, are building a public perception that anti-corruption enforcement in Nigeria follows political loyalty rather than evidence. El-Rufai left the APC in 2024 and was charged in 2026. Yahaya Bello, against whom the EFCC has outstanding allegations, received a presidential appointment. Matawale, against whom allegations were made, was politically accommodated. More than half of Nigerians, 53.1% in the Business Day poll, said they do not support Tinubu's bid for a second term. This selective justice narrative, if it consolidates before 2027, will be one of the opposition's most powerful mobilizing arguments, particularly among the educated urban voters who swung to Obi in 2023 and are still looking for reasons to trust or distrust the incumbent. Vulnerability rating, medium. The perception damage is real. The question is whether it reaches beyond the already convinced opposition base to genuinely undecided voters. 5. The US relationship drift and the diplomatic vacuum. Since his inauguration in May 2023, Tinubu has not traveled to Washington, allowing a diplomatic vacuum to develop with Nigeria's most strategically significant bilateral partner. He recalled all Nigerian ambassadors worldwide and had not appointed permanent replacements for an extended period. He was conspicuously absent from Trump's meeting with West African leaders. Nigeria's CPC, Countries of Particular Concern, designation by the US over religious freedom issues could complicate security cooperation, including military training and intelligence sharing, critical to the counter-terrorism operations that his administration's most visible security tool. For an administration whose economic recovery depends on foreign direct investment and whose security strategy depends on international intelligence cooperation, the drift in the US relationship is a strategic liability. It has not been publicly acknowledged, it has not been publicly addressed, and in a 2027 election where the opposition is building diaspora networks in the UK and US, the diplomatic gap gives the opposition an international legitimacy platform that an engaged Nigerian presidency would have denied them. Vulnerability rating, medium. Not immediately visible to domestic voters, but structurally significant for investment climate and security cooperation that underpins his economic narrative. A PDP chieftain stated on Channels Television that Tinubu knows a free and fair election would not give the APC 20% of the vote. The APC currently controls 31 governors, 80 senators, and 241 House members. If that institutional dominance is the product of machine politics rather than genuine popularity, and if INEC's conduct in 2027 is cleaner than in 2023, the gap between Tinubu's political architecture and his electoral mandate could be exposed in ways that no amount of infrastructure delivery can compensate for. The Owalapo Hashim claim is not evidence, but it is the question that every Nigerian should hold in mind as the 2027 preparations accelerate. The Goodluck Jonathan parallel, examined precisely. Political analysts have drawn the Jonathan comparison repeatedly, and it deserves precise examination because the parallels are real, but the differences are also real. Jonathan in 2015 had 28 governors, but a fractious party with divided loyalties. His grip on the National Assembly was tenuous despite his numbers.
Tinubu's grip on his 31 governors and his legislative majority is significantly more disciplined because many of those governors owe their political existence to him in ways that Jonathan's allies did not. The key difference is this. Jonathan lost because a united, credible opposition with a single candidate emerged at exactly the right moment. For Tinubu to face a comparable threat in 2027, the ADC coalition must do what the APC did in 2015, produce a single candidate who bridges ethnic, religious, and regional divides with a running mate combination that neutralizes the incumbent base. That coalition has not yet demonstrated it can produce that candidate. Until it does, Tinubu's structural advantage holds. The transition from reformer to campaigner. Tinubu is already visibly transitioning from reformer to campaigner. Infrastructure announcements are accelerating. Political outreach tours are intensifying. The APC's Southwest Mobilization Plan targets 10 million votes in 6 states alone, a number that would require significant voter registration drives and ground operations that are already underway. This transition is smart politics, but it is also visible, and Nigerians who endured the pain of the reforms will watch carefully whether the man who asked them to sacrifice is now spending their sacrifice on his own re-election rather than on their relief. The one-party state concern and its electoral implications. The APC's dominance of 31 governorships and the National Assembly has triggered genuine concern about Nigeria's democratic health. Fears of a one-party state are being expressed by opposition figures and civil society alike. That concern is not primarily a security concern. It is an electoral concern. A political environment perceived as heading toward one-party dominance mobilizes resistance among voters who might otherwise be apathetic. The more the APC consolidates, the more the opposition's counter-narrative of democratic erosion gains emotional purchase, particularly among the educated urban voters who powered the obedient movement in 2023. The APC's National Convention was scheduled for March 27th to 28th, 2026, a critical internal milestone for the APC's 2027 machinery. The management of the convention, particularly its handling of zoning arrangements and internal leadership positions, will either reinforce the party's discipline or expose the fractures that opponents are waiting to exploit. Nigerian ruling parties that enter election years with unresolved internal grievances from their conventions have historically underperformed their structural advantages. Watch the convention outcome as a leading indicator of APC internal cohesion going into 2027. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything.
The kitchen test versus the IMF test. The most important analytical distinction in the Tinubu 2027 assessment is the difference between the economy that international institutions evaluate and the economy that Nigerian voters experience. The IMF and World Bank assess macroeconomic indicators, exchange rate stability, fiscal deficit ratios, subsidy rationalization, debt service capacity. These indicators have shown measurable improvement under Tinubu's reforms. Nigerian voters assess prices, the cost of rice, the price of petrol, the school fees their naira can no longer cover. These indicators have shown measurable deterioration. In a Nigerian presidential election, the voter's kitchen beats the IMF's spreadsheet every time. The question for Tinubu's 2027 campaign is whether the macroeconomic improvements translate into household-level relief in time for January 2027. If they do, he wins comfortably. If they do not, his structural political advantages will be tested against a population that endured reform pain without experiencing reform benefit. The food crisis and its political geography. The security-driven displacement of farmers across the Northeast and Northwest is producing a food inflation crisis that hits the North hardest, and the North is where Tinubu's 25% constitutional thresholds are most strategically critical. A Northern elder's warning that without food and security, Nigerians will not vote for him is not a political statement. It is an observation about the political geography of electoral survival. Tinubu won the North with constitutional minimums in 2023. He needs those minimums again in 2027, and the conditions for those minimums are deteriorating in the places that matter most. Democratic Health Assessment. An incumbent who wins the IMF's approval while losing his citizens' groceries is governing in a political paradox that no amount of party consolidation can resolve. That paradox will be resolved in one of two ways by January 2027. Either the economic trajectory shifts enough that household-level relief becomes visible, in which case the reform's pain becomes the reform's political dividend, or the trajectory does not shift enough, in which case the reform's pain becomes the opposition's most powerful campaign asset. The direction of that resolution will determine whether 2027 is Tinubu's coronation or his reckoning. The U.S. relationship and its electoral consequences. Nigeria's relationship with the United States carries direct electoral implications in a way that is often underestimated. The diaspora communities in the UK and US who cannot vote but can fund, organize, and generate international media coverage are a significant asymmetric asset for the opposition. Peter Obi's 2023 campaign drew substantial diaspora financial and organizational support. The opposition coalition for 2027 is building on that infrastructure. A Nigerian presidency that has allowed the US relationship to drift has, inadvertently, given the opposition an international legitimacy platform. The France military offer and its optics. French President Macron recently offered military equipment support to Nigeria in a meeting with Tinubu. France has been expelled from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic by their military governments. Its strategic interest in Nigerian engagement is partly driven by the need for a southern anchor for Sahel counter-terrorism after losing its northern positions. Accepting French military partnership carries genuine operational value for Nigeria's counter-terrorism capacity. It also carries significant political optics risk in a domestic environment where distrust of Western interference is a mobilizing sentiment, and in a regional context where Nigeria's Sahel neighbors are watching Abuja's alignment choices carefully. The diaspora dimension. Nigerian diaspora communities in the UK and US are not monolithic. They are divided by the same ethnic, regional, and religious lines as the home country. But they share one characteristic that is politically significant. They are more likely than domestic voters to prioritize governance quality over ethnic affiliation. That disposition makes diaspora communities more responsive to the anti-corruption, pro-accountability messaging that the opposition is building and more likely to fund and amplify opposition campaigns internationally in ways that shape the domestic narrative. The strongest case for Tinubu winning comfortably. Let me be clear, this channel does not take sides, it takes evidence, and the case for Tinubu winning 2027 comfortably is substantial. He controls 31 governors who control state-level electoral machinery. He controls the National Assembly majority that confirms federal appointments and sets the legislative agenda. The APC's voter registration drive is targeting a 50% increase in registered voters in key states by August 2026. The opposition coalition has not resolved its presidential ticket question, and a fragmented opposition gave Tinubu his 36.6% victory in 2023. If that fragmentation persists, his structural advantages are not just sufficient, they are decisive. No sitting Nigerian president has lost a re-election bid. History, institutions, and party machinery
all favor him.
Misconceptions in circulation. 1. Tinubu's economic reforms are purely destructive. False. The fuel subsidy removals saved the Federation account approximately 4 trillion naira annually, money that was previously captured disproportionately by wealthy fuel importers, not poor Nigerians. The naira float was essential for attracting the foreign investment that a subsidy-distorted exchange rate was preventing. The reforms were designed correctly. The problem is sequencing. The pain arrived before the benefit, and the benefit may not arrive before the election. 2. The opposition coalition is ready to beat Tinubu. Not yet. The ADC coalition, which includes elements of the PDP, Labour Party, and other parties around Atiku and Obi, has not resolved the presidential ticket question. A coalition where both Atiku and Obi want the top position is not a coalition, it is a negotiation in progress. Until that negotiation concludes with a single, broadly accepted candidate, Tinubu faces a divided opposition, and a divided opposition is his most reliable electoral ally. 3. Infrastructure delivery has solved Tinubu's popularity problem. Infrastructure is necessary but not sufficient. Nigerians can see a new road and still not be able to afford what they sell at the market it leads to. Physical development projects carry political weight in Nigerian elections, but they carry less weight when the voter is making the calculation on an empty stomach. The infrastructure delivery is real. Its ability to compensate for economic pain is limited. The APC Senate leader announced that the party has designed a mobilization plan to deliver at least 10 million votes for Tinubu from the Southwest alone in 2027. In 2023, Tinubu's total national vote was 8.79 million. The target of 10 million from the Southwest alone, where his home base is concentrated, implies a total national vote target that would represent a historic margin of victory. That ambition is either genuine momentum or evidence that the party is managing the perception of inevitability as a substitute for actual electoral preparation. Both possibilities deserve analytical scrutiny. Most likely next moves. The Tinubu campaign will accelerate infrastructure delivery announcements in the 12 months before the election, maximizing visible evidence of governance. Will deploy federal resources strategically in contested states, particularly in the North Central and South South where his 2023 margins were thinnest. Will manage the running mate question carefully, possibly signaling a Christian VP option to diffuse the Muslim-Muslim ticket vulnerability without formally committing to a change that would alienate his northern base. Will use the INEC voter registration drive and APC ground operations to expand the registered voter base in APC strongholds before August 2026. The opposition coalition must resolve the presidential ticket question by mid-2026 to have any realistic chance of building the national campaign infrastructure needed for January 2027. If Obi and Atiku cannot agree on a unified candidate by that deadline, the coalition's electoral threat remains theoretical. If they do agree, and if Kwankwaso's bloc is formally incorporated, the arithmetic becomes genuinely competitive. The economic variable is the most significant independent variable in this entire analysis. If the naira stabilizes at a level that reduces food and fuel prices by a measurable amount by mid-2026, the reform narrative gains electoral traction. If it does not, the economic pain that has been accumulating since May 2023 will reach its maximum electoral expression in January 2027. No political machine, however powerful, has historically been able to override a voter's lived experience of economic suffering. Signals to watch. Whether the naira exchange rate shows sustained improvement by mid-2026. whether Tinubu replaces the Muslim ticket before the party's formal candidate selection process, whether the ADC coalition resolves its presidential ticket question by mid-2026, whether Kwankwaso formally signed an alliance agreement with the opposition bloc, whether INEC's 2027 election management demonstrates credible independence from the ruling party, and whether the security situation in the North Central and Northwest improves or continues to deteriorate in the months before polling day. The PDP chieftains claim that Tinubu knows a free and fair election would not give the APC 20% is analytically provocative, but not empirically verifiable. What is verifiable is that the APC's 31 governor dominance was achieved largely through defections rather than electoral victories, meaning its legislative and gubernatorial strength does not directly reflect its popular electoral popularity. The gap between institutional control and popular support is real. Whether INEC's conduct in 2027 allows that gap to matter is the most consequential institutional question in Nigerian politics today. The Muslim ticket vulnerability is more exposed in 2027 than it was in 2023 for three documented reasons. The US-Nigeria Religious Freedom Act has placed Christian persecution in Nigeria on the international legislative agenda. The domestic Sharia debate is more inflamed, and the opposition's 2027 candidate selection will almost certainly produce a Muslim-Christian or Christian-Muslim ticket designed specifically to exploit the religious contrast. Tinubu's most effective response is not to change Shetima, which would be read as weakness, but to demonstrate through visible appointments, policy decisions, and community engagement that his administration governs for all Nigerians regardless of religion. Whether he can demonstrate that convincingly is an open question. Best case scenario for Tinubu. The Naira stabilizes meaningfully by mid-2026. Food prices begin to reflect the agricultural sector recovery. The opposition coalition fractures over the presidential ticket and runs divided. INEC manages a credible process. Tinubu wins a second term with a significantly larger vote share than 2023, demonstrating that his 2023 plurality was the floor, not the ceiling, of his popular support. Worst case scenario for Tinubu. The economic pain persists into the election cycle. The opposition produces a single, credible candidate with a North-South Muslim-Christian ticket. Insecurity in the North continues to erode threshold percentages in critical states. INEC's conduct is credible enough that result manipulation is not available as a backstop. And Tinubu becomes the first sitting Nigerian president to lose a re-election bid, making 2027 Nigeria's 2015 moment, with the roles reversed. We began with a description. Tinubu is playing all the cards right. And that description is accurate. The political architecture he has built, 31 governors, legislative dominance, weakened opposition, visible infrastructure, is the most formidable incumbency position any Nigerian president has constructed since the return of democracy. But here is what Afronews HQ is saying today, and we say it with evidence, not emotion. Playing all the cards right in Nigerian politics means controlling the institutions, the governors, the party machinery, and the federal resources. What it does not automatically control is the kitchen, the farm, the petrol queue, the school fees, the exchange rate, the bridge that was bombed at 2 a.m. by jihadists who sent a ransom letter 48 hours before and were not stopped. Tinubu is the favorite for 2027. He has more political advantages than any Nigerian president has had at this stage of an electoral cycle in democratic history. But here is what Afronews HQ is saying today, and we say it with evidence, not emotion. Playing all the cards right in Nigerian politics means controlling the institutions, the governors, the party machinery, and the federal resources. What it does not automatically control is the kitchen, the farm, the petrol queue, the school fees, the exchange rate, the bridge that was bombed at 2 a.m. by jihadists who sent a ransom letter 48 hours before and were not stopped. Tinubu is the favorite for 2027. He has more political advantages than any Nigerian president has had at this stage of an electoral cycle in democratic history. But he is also governing a country where over 130 million people live below the poverty line, where the economy has contracted by a measure the World Bank has documented, and where security forces cannot protect a bridge connecting 3 communities in Niger State. The question for 2027 is not whether Tinubu is politically dominant. He is. The question is whether political dominance is sufficient when the people you are asking to vote for you cannot afford to eat. That question has no comfortable answer, and in the gap between the political architecture and the lived reality, that is where the real 2027 election will be fought. Tinubu is the favorite. He is not unbeatable. The difference between those 2 statements is where Nigerian democracy will be tested in January 2027. You now know something that most Nigerians watching the news tonight do not know. What you do with it is up to you. Share it, debate it, challenge it. That is how democracies survive. Afro News HQ. Nigeria deserves better analysis. See you in the next one.